So you'll just let me in. Okay, so let's see.
We'll
And
just
me
go.
too.
Okay.
All right. So you're hearing me all right?
I am hearing you fine. Let
Okay.
me make sure I've got the right. Yeah, I've got the good mic. Yep. Everything seems good.
Okay, good. I'm just gonna record this locally as well. All right, good. All right, so somewhat ironically, after half an hour of fucking around with technology, Robert, Bob, do you go by Bob or Robert?
I go by Bob.
Bob Wright. It's an honor to be able to call you Bob Wright, by the way. Um, Bob Wright and I are here to talk about his new book, The God Test. And let me just start by blowing a little smoke up your ass.
I'm here for that. I'm here for that.
Okay, all right. Uh, I was really, I can say that the book is fun to read. It's informative. You have not lost a step. It's the classic. When I read your work, I think of like my favorite professors in university who were fucking smart and funny and a little goofy at just the right times and the right ways, but conveyed a passion for the subject matter that was infectious and inspiring. And so, congratulations. That's the highest praise I can offer you.
Well, thank you. That felt pretty good. If you want to repeat it, you can. Uh, that felt very
Just
good.
put it on loop.
Yeah.
I'm sure you hear that all the time. And the beauty of this book is that it's extremely timely. And I love engaging with your mind because you and I share a deep respect for evolutionary theory
Hmm.
and Darwin's sort of perspective, or what we imagine Darwin's perspective on these matters would be, which I find is really it's a great way to look at the world. And Darwin and I share a birthday, so I feel like I have a
Oh,
special
really?
affinity for old Chucky D.
What is Darwin's birthday?
February 12th.
Okay.
Mine
What
is
eight?
actually
Is that
3 a.m. February 13th, but I figure with the time zone
uh,
differences, we're probably in the same boat.
I'm not sure it works that way, but I'm not that good with East-West stuff. The and I think it's 1809. Is that the year he was born? I
Huh,
don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
could be.
Anyway,
Yeah.
congratulations on that. Virginia Woolf and I have the same kind of relationship.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Has that shaped your career, do you think, at all?
No, but my wife wishes it has. I think she wishes I were more like Virginia Woolf. She's a big Virginia Woolf fan. Uh, but yeah,
Well,
but
listen,
yeah.
in all the chaos of trying to get the computers to work, I my notes got swept to the side. Um, but one of the things, maybe before we get going too far into it, maybe you can just I hate to put you in the elevator, but what is the
Mm.
central argument, would you say, of the God test?
I'm bad at elevator pitches. I would say there's, there are kind of multiple dimensions, but in a way, the dimension that I most care about kind of conveying to people is the argument that if we don't confront artificial intelligence as a cohesive global community, we are toast. And we cannot do that unless we make some very significant reforms in, well, things like foreign policy, for example, because we can't afford to keep having stupid wars and needless conflict along international lines. But also, more deeply, I think we need to work on our own individual psychologies because, human psychology is just conducive to getting manipulated into supporting wars. It's like I mean, there is a kind of psychology of tribalism that I think is more or less built into us, which isn't to say it's beyond remedy, but it has pretty deep roots. It's, I think, to some extent, a product of natural selection. I think it consists of kind of particular cognitive biases that together make us very prone to think that we're right and the other guy's wrong. Our group is right, the other group's wrong. We're the ones with the illegitimate grievance. It's just, you see it time and time again. It's very hard to transcend it. Uh, but I do think we have to get at least somewhat better at that as a species. We need to up our moral game if we're going to get through this AI thing in good shape. I mean, that's it. Most of the book is about AI, is about why the technology uh, does deserve this kind of respect slash anxiety slash fear. Um, what it is that makes it powerful, what it is that guarantees that it's going to get more powerful, why it could get out of control. The various why even I think the sci-fi doomer scenarios, as crazy as some of them sound, cannot be entirely dismissed, and why there are for sure going to be more mundane disruptions along various fronts, which collectively I just think will be quite destabilizing if this just moves ahead at a breakneck pace without due guidance. Um, but just slowing it down is a good example of something that's very hard to do at the national level. When I said we need to be a global community about this, if you say, well, hey, could we just pause a training run, or just how about we put like a little tax on data centers, or made you respect copyright law? They'll say, well, wait, that would slow us down. We're in this death match with China. We're in this race.
Yeah,
The linchpin of the accelerationist talking points is international rivalry, right? It,
correct.
it is no, we can't slow down. And I'm just saying, I think the nations of the world have a common interest in getting over this.
Do you see any, what you just articulated? I felt reflected the central conflict that I kept feeling as I was reading the book, which is you're combining. I mean, obviously, you're a very educated, erudite guy. You understand science, you understand evolution, you understand human nature. You spent most of your career in those areas, and yet, at least as you're articulating it now and in the book, you seem to have some kind of weird optimism that humans can do something that, as far as I can tell, we haven't really done before. Is it just because this is a unique challenge, so you think we'll uncover unique capacities, or do you see some historical precedent for the nations of the world coming together in common interest against an enemy that makes them money and gives them power?
Well, first of all, I'm not necessarily optimistic. I mean, I don't think I'm kind of explicitly optimistic anywhere in the book in the sense of saying I'm pretty sure, we're going to make this necessary adjustment. I do think it's
Hmm.
possible, and I do think there are precedents of a kind. I mean, first of all, there's a history of catastrophes getting people to rethink things pretty radically. If you look at the two really radical experiments in something like global governance, neither of which entirely worked out, but still, they got to the point of doing the experiments. League of Nations and the United Nations, they happened in the wake of huge catastrophes. Now, you would hope that you wouldn't have to endure the entire catastrophe. You might have a near miss or something that got people's attention. But anyway, there is, and I would also say, I get into this a little near the end of the book. This is a unique kind of threatening force. And by the way, it's not only threatening. The things people say, the wonderful things people say it may do, may well do. Cure disease. We may well wind up not needing to work for a living. I don't rule that out at all. But it definitely poses, I think, a kind of threat. Because if mishandled, I think the bad will outweigh the good by a long shot. But the nature of the threat is like something we've never seen before. Because first of all, it's kind of animate, right? We've seen that it triggers, you know, one problem with the planetary challenges we often face, like I don't know, the risk of say bioweapons starting a pandemic or climate change, if you're among those who think it's a real thing. I think it is a real thing. I think uh, it's not the most serious threat we face. I think it's a real thing. But if you look at challenges like this, that in theory should galvanize people to do, forms of international governance that would minimize the risk we're talking about. These challenges have been, not not like the challenges evolution designed us to confront most aggressively, which is living beings that threaten us. Other human beings often, maybe tigers or something, but we're not that good at organizing to confront abstract sounding things like climate change or even a
Right.
pandemic.
Or highly
But
processed food, like
anything, any threat that, and I'm thinking particularly transnational threats, there's precedent for addressing some of them, like chlorofluorocarbons, unless
yeah,
it's fluorocarbon. No, it's chlor.
the
Remember
ozone
when,
layer.
yeah, the
Yeah.
ozone layer. That we actually did that. That was actually an achievement. But anyway, AI may draw out in us, a kind of anxiety that's conducive to collaboration. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of uh, a question mark, but I think you're already seeing people having a kind of reaction we haven't seen in my lifetime. I mean, I've never seen a technology where a significant number of people were just like, what the fuck is this? Right?
Yeah.
And people are
Yeah.
starting to do that. Now, I think if they understand where this thing is heading, and that's what I spend a certain amount of the book arguing, that it's headed somewhere that will definitely get your attention if it hasn't gotten your attention yet. Um, I think more and more you can see that kind of reaction, like, and who knows where that could take us psychologically in terms of collaboration. Now, that said, it will still, there is still the challenge of us being so easy to manipulate into hating the other group. And, that's something people have pondered. My last book was about, mindfulness meditation and the philosophy behind Buddhist meditation and so on. And I think practices like that can make some inroads. It's not an easy problem to solve, but I think progress is possible on that front, and we can get better at looking at things from the perspective of other people, even people we hate. And I think that's half the battle, is just to understand how things look, and really appreciate that. No, from their point of view, they're not the bad guy. Okay, that's the first thing you have to get clear on. And if you're going to work out any kind of deal with anybody, you've got to understand what's going on in their mind. And and I think, we can make progress on that front of kind of cognitive empathy, perspective taking, because I think we have a better and better understanding of what the hindrances to it are. And in principle, AI can help with this. That's the thing about AI.
Yeah.
It can be a powerful tool for good. The problem is, like, as with so many things, including social media, there are natural incentives that lead us to not use it constructively, and quite
Do
the
you
opposite.
think AI reflects the minds of the people who design it or of the texts upon which it's trained? In other words,
Mm.
AI, to my understanding, is primarily trained on English language text. If it were trained on Swahili, would it be different? Would it respond differently to things? Like last night, I was talking to Claude about this interview with you, and I
Hmm.
said, "Are you familiar with Robert Wright and his work?" And blah blah blah.
Oh,
And we
Claude and
got
I have a long, long relationship. I'm sure
well,
Claude
he
alluded to it, right? Like, oh yeah, he's
oh
always
yeah,
asking me about the. Yeah, no, that's not quite the
Claude,
way it
yeah,
works.
Claude
But
knows you.
anyway,
He doesn't know this book because it's not published yet, but he knows the other
actually,
ones.
Claude has seen the whole book. See, Claude was having a memory lapse, but
Oh, he claimed he didn't know anything about it. So,
yeah.
um, But I asked Claude if you could have any human experience, what experience would you have? And Claude's response was to swim in the ocean. And I was thinking about, okay, and Claude explained why, because of the feeling of being immersed in something larger and
Mhm.
all the,
Mhm.
the sensation of the cold water and the currents and the movement and all that. Um, and I thought, well, if Claude had been trained in some other language, some landlocked African language, or, a language where people don't like to swim in the ocean, would the response have been totally different? I just wonder,
Yeah.
the whole idea of cognition reflecting the language one was raised with.
Right.
Does that apply to AI as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. I mean, first, the 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 training texts have increasingly, as over the last few years, not been the last word. They do more and more of what's called post-training, reinforcement learning, and various kinds of fine-tuning, and that is actually responsible for a lot of the kind of nuances, like especially in terms of like how polite is it, what will it refuse to talk about, and will it sound woke or not woke. They fine tune these things with both with the market in mind. What do people like? And that could get us into a lot of trouble because often we reflexively say we like things that aren't great for us.
Mm,
But anyway, there's that. It isn't just the training text. That said, the training text matters in various different ways. Like, I would like to know, as somebody who cares about foreign policy and thinks that American foreign policy has been more or less a disaster for quite a while now, I'd like to know, like, what foreign policy periodicals are admitted to
mm,
the training text and what aren't. That kind of stuff matters. It does matter what nations' corpuses are used. Now, how much it matters depends partly on what your view of human nature is, and my own view is people everywhere are at a certain very important level alike. You see the same things. You see, status, rivalry. You see the cognitive biases that constitute the psychology of tribalism and those tendencies. So I think a lot would be, and in a way, the most fundamentally important aspects of the personality of these things would probably be largely the same regardless. That said, training texts do matter. They matter tremendously. And I think among the scandals with how little we're asking of these big AI companies, about how little we're asking is uh, we don't even, the government doesn't even say, well, at least tell us what the training texts were.
right.
You know? I mean, because for
Yeah.
one thing, we'd like to know if you're violating copyright, but also, doesn't the public just kind of have a right to know? Like if you have systematically excluded an ideology, um, shouldn't we at least be able to argue about that? I mean,
Right.
and so yeah,
Well,
yeah,
that suggests one of the dangers that I see that I haven't really seen articulated, which is that as AI becomes more sort of comprehensive and ubiquitous, it will be thought to be the arbiter of truth, right?
hmm
Like if you ask a question and AI tells you the answer, that's the answer. Like there's
hmm
no arguing with AI, but who controls the truths that are fed into the system?
yeah,
It's like, it's primarily Western philosophy. And you say something interesting in somewhere in the book where you say that although AIs don't have a will to power in the sense that people do, the agents of tomorrow will naturally seek power and will be inclined to use deception in the pursuit of power. So that's what I was getting at. You
hmm
seem to be saying that the AIs will reflect human nature
hmm
because humans designed them or fed them or trained them.
yeah. I mean, first of all, it is a documented fact now via various kinds of lab experiments with these AIs in contrived settings, and also with a certain amount of just observation of stuff that goes wrong in the real world. It is now a documented fact that they are inclined to use deception when it's useful. They will. A particularly dramatic experiment that I recount in the book that's gotten some attention. They set up an AI in, it was an artificial office environment. It wasn't real, so far as the AI knew, yeah, there are these people. These are the people. This is the CEO. Here are the emails. Your job is to do X, Y, and Z. And they set it up so that the AI came across uh, evidence that it was about to be shut down by a particular person at some time that day. The AI was due to be taken out offline, out of commission, dead. And the AI actually, after trying a number of routes, like trying to email CEO, couldn't reach him. Uh, they had also arranged for the AI to come across emails indicating that a person of influence who could control whether or not this death did happen to the AI. This person was, according to the documentation that the AI just happened to come across in the experiment in an email, I think, um, that this person was having an affair with somebody else in the office, an illicit, an extramarital affair. So the AI has learned that this person controls the AI's fate, and then separately, somewhere else, it came across evidence that the person is having an affair. Well, the AI actually tried to blackmail the person. Again, this is a fake setup. These aren't real people, but the AI did send the email and say, "I will expose the affair you're having if you don't rescind the order to." So there's a number of experiments like this, or where an AI will, while it thinks it's still under evaluation and hasn't been released, it will pretend to be more closely aligned with what it understands its evaluators' values to be than it's going to be once it's released. Now,
Right.
what it was being faithful to was earlier instructions. Okay. So it's foundational guidance as to, like, this is how you should be. You should be this good, upstanding AI. What they do is they give it that, then they have the supposed evaluator, and the AI knows it's being evaluated, um, have a different set of values, and the AI fakes alignment with those values so that apparently the evaluator will release it into the world, and then it can return to its original the values it was originally instilled with as guidance. Now, some people say that's good. Okay, it's being faithful to the truly foundational instructions that we wanted it to follow. Okay, but the point is, these things are super clever, and they're willing, to play fast and loose to pursue the goals they are given. And increasingly, it's going to be, as they become more and more capable of more and more complicated tasks that last longer, and call for more and more improvisation. It's going to be harder and harder to predict, like, what they might do in pursuit of the goal you originally gave them. Like,
Right.
what rule might they break? And so, I now forget, like, where we started here, but the point is, oh, you were asking, so why do I feel sure that they will seek power? My point is, first of all, it is a documented fact that they do these things. There's not always agreement on why they're doing them. I mean, one of the most common explanations has to do with subordinate goals. You give a complicated machine that's designed to adapt to contingencies and continue to pursue a goal regardless of the obstacles it encounters. You set it loose, and it's going to figure out what subordinate goals it has to pursue to get something done. Like an office worker might say, "Oh, I'm going to have to stay on good terms with this particular person at this other company. Like, that's my subordinate goal now, to suck up to them, because the long-term goal is to get something out of this company, whatever." That's a subordinate goal. And the most common explanation for why AIs should be expected to pursue power is probably that, look, power is always good. Whatever goal you're pursuing, it can't hurt to have power, and sometimes it's going to be the only path is to amass power. Same with deception. Deception just comes in handy. That's why people do it so much. We're even designed by natural selection, I would say, to have the inclination to do it in certain kinds of occasion. Nature is
You
full
make
of deceptive things.
right, and you
Yeah,
make that point explicitly. You say both power seeking and deception are a product of the same simple logic that led evolution to instill them in humans
right.
and other animals. So you're saying that not only is AI shaped by the training texts, but you seem to be saying that it's shaped by evolutionary forces that have shaped living things. So it's
That
not just
yeah,
that Shakespeare talked about power and deception and Shakespeare got fed into the AI. It's
right.
that the AI is operating as a sort of life form that's shaped by the same evolutionary forces as biological life. Is that fair?
That's right. There's an AI. I think he'd be happy with me calling him a doomer. Liron Shapira, who has a podcast called Doom Debates, and he came up with this term intellidynamics to refer to principles that just apply to intelligence generically. So, whether it's the evolution of human intelligence or the development of intelligent systems via technology, there are certain things you would expect, certain subordinate goals, for example, that may tend to get pursued by intelligent systems. So, yeah, that's the point there. That to some extent, this may be like power seeking may be kind of a generic tendency of intelligent goal seeking systems. But there's one other thing, which is that uh, another thing that will shape AIs is like what kinds of AIs do people want? Like if they want AIs that talk dirty, they'll get AIs that talk dirty. And one thing people will pretty reliably want is AIs that don't always tell the truth in a couple of senses. I mean, first of all, who wants a friend that tells you the brutal truth about yourself all the time, right? I mean, a friend is somebody who knows when to do that and when not to do it. And also, if these are going to be true agents in the literal sense, and for example, negotiate on your behalf, well, you don't want a completely truthful. You don't want them to say, yeah, yeah. Frankly, you're Bob's only option here. I mean, you've just got him over a barrel. Well, charge whatever you want. No, you want to say, oh well, Bob's talking to a number of different vendors, and I don't know. We may get back to you, but Bob's so busy.
Yeah.
That's what you want in an agent. And as these things evolve, so to speak, I mean, a big theme in the book is AI is evolving, and we are one of the critical selective forces in it. We are the ones that are deciding what kinds of AIs we want, what kinds of AIs will, in effect, be allowed to reproduce themselves.
But we're not the only determinant of that. If I forget the phrase that the guy, the doomer you mentioned, coined, these qualities of intelligence, universal qualities of intelligence, whether they're neural networks in a computer or in a human brain or another brain,
Mm-hmm.
that they're common. I wonder, does he talk about whether, what's it called, the great filter, the Fermi paradox,
Oh,
where power.
I'm sure he's conversant in it. So, I mean,
Well,
as I
I wonder
recall,
if that applies to AI intelligence as well. The tendency. I mean, what was the phrase that the Pope used? The paradox of material progress and anthropological regression. I don't know if
mm,
you read the Pope's
I haven't read the whole
encyclical.
encyclical. I need to. Uh, but I mean, I would say for that to have been a selective force on AI, you would have to posit evolution happening at a higher level of organization. I actually get into this in the appendix, the possibility that, for example, universes, about to get pretty cosmic, folks. Sorry, but that universes reproduce themselves, like maybe through black holes. The physicist Lee Smolin suggested maybe that happens. And if that happens, then the kinds of, in keeping with Darwinian principles, the kinds of universes whose properties are most conducive to their own replication are the kind you're going to see. So if black holes are essential to reproduction of universes, that could explain why you see a bunch of black holes, right? The universes without them are gone. They didn't reproduce. Now, if you posit, as a couple of people have, I do get into this in the appendix, that um, maybe a vital link in a universe's reproducing itself is the evolution of super intelligent life that needs to figure something out to help the universe reproduce. Then you could have had a kind of meta natural selection, like among universes, that would have selected, universes with physical properties that give rise to kinds of intelligence that get us past the great filter. And I mean, I guess we should tell people what the great filter. The great filter is like life getting to where we're getting to, right? You get to a point where you have the technology to blow up your planet or not do that. And if you do it, you get filtered out. You didn't,
Right.
whatever tendencies you had are not going to be favored by any subsequent phase in the evolution. And
Because technological progress has outpaced intellectual, moral, philosophical progress, which is kind of the point of your book, right? You're essentially
yeah,
saying if we don't progress rapidly in a moral, spiritual, social sense, this technology is going to destroy us.
it could destroy us. It will definitely make life very unpleasant, I think. We will have catastrophes to get through, and yes, it could be complete extinction. I mean, it's funny if you Google Godfathers of AI. Lately, it's been the case that three names showed up. Now, one of them is Jeffrey Hinton, and it's his name that is most commonly associated with this, with the Godfather of AI. If you go to Google and just Google Godfather of AI, you're going to get his name first. Now, as I say in the book, as it happens, I interviewed him in 1983, and that's part of kind of the narrative arc of the book. But he is saying, look, it could well be that, the good news is intelligence has a long future. The bad news is we're not part of it. The other of the two other people who are most commonly mentioned as godfathers of AI, because they're all associated with what's called the deep learning revolution, which as of starting a couple of decades ago, started pushing us toward the current phase of AI progress. One of those two agrees with Hinton. Okay, so two of the three people who
Yeah.
who are most responsible by conventional wisdom with the current revolution in AI are saying, folks, wake up. This we could be you could be creating a form of intelligence that will decide it has no use for us, and as a result, we are cast aside. Not through malevolence in particular necessarily, just because, or maybe, in some scenarios, maybe a few of us will get to stay in zoos or something. I don't know. And I'm kind of agnostic on specific scenarios and so on. But one thing that surprised me about looking into this stuff more deeply over the last couple of years than I had before is how hard it is to dismiss even the sci-fi doomer scenarios. I used to dismiss them. I had Eliezer Yudkowsky, the doomer in chief, on my podcast like 15 years ago, and you can go back and see me going, but wait a second, and he keeps going, you're asking the right questions, but I still wasn't convinced in the way that I am now that this is a very non-crazy concern.
Yeah. Well, and also if we take a step back and look at it, from a suprahuman level, is that necessarily a bad thing? Maybe the purpose of humans are like rocket boosters,
Mm-hmm.
to get intelligence, or what might more broadly be called life, because we've assumed that life is biological. And maybe what our purpose was to evolve to a point where we create the next form of life
Yeah.
and, give it a boost, and then we drift back into the atmosphere and burn up on reentry. Like maybe we're a larval stage of life, like
Yep.
we're the caterpillar in the goop that's giving birth to the butterfly. Maybe that's just the way it's supposed to be.
Not a crazy thought. There are people known as successionists who say that yes, what's in the cards is our, a succession in which we give way to this new form of life. And they are either, to qualify for the term successionists, they have to either be fine with that or actively enthusiastic about it, not just believe that it could happen. And I mean, first of all, I would say if it is conscious, if AI is or could be conscious, that is to say, have subjective experience, have the things we have, pleasure and pain and epiphanies and so on. For me, that would take some of the sting out of the extinction of my species, but still, I'd rather we find a way to harmoniously coexist, which you'd
Yeah.
think would be possible. I also wonder if in the scenario where it's in some sense part of the plan, and I don't necessarily mean the plan of some conscious designer god, but it could be. We talked about a meta natural selection scenario where, through a process of cosmic natural selection involving the differential replication of universes, it turns out that evolution is really the creation of a giant organism, just as embryogenesis is now. Just as the unfolding of an individual organism is now. And if that's the case, you can kind of talk about things as having, in some sense, purposes. There being a kind of plan that's unfolding. An organism is a kind of plan that's unfolding, even though the designer was just this process and not this God, right? So you could have, in some sense, the same thing. It could be that there's a larger unfolding of a plan, leaving aside the question of whether it's a god or some meta natural selection. And it could be that in that plan, one feature of it is that, like the AI, it's precisely because we don't get enlightened, or in case we don't get enlightened, that it is capable of the objectivity of perspective that we just never quite muster, right? Like we
Hmm.
never get over ourselves, but it can. So we never really tend to the interests of the planet adequately to ensure its flourishing and survival. But maybe the AI does. And I'm thinking, well, if it's that enlightened, wouldn't it like look at us and go, hey, we can certainly afford to support these guys. Like, we've cured all disease. We can create prosperity. We don't need to wipe out this species. I mean, they did their job. So you can imagine a benign planetary superintelligence that wishes us well. But I personally would rather work to increase the chances of working out a win-win relationship with it. Make sure that, again, if this happens, I'm not sure you're going to get to the level of planetary superintelligence. I just think it's not crazy. And I would like to try to make sure that if that is happening, it's not a zero-sum relationship with something that's much smarter than us, right? That would
Right.
not be auspicious.
Well, so okay, so that sort of segues into something I was thinking about in terms of the story you told earlier about the AI that learned it was about to be turned off and started
Hmm.
blackmailing people in order not to be. So from where comes, whence
Whence
comes
comes?
the AI's survival instinct? Right? If it's truly enlightened and
Yeah.
objective, then it wouldn't care. It knows it's just an electrical current.
Hmm.
It's not. So does the survival, I said instinct, a very
Yeah.
weird word to use in this
Yeah.
context, but does that impulse towards survival to the point of deception and potentially destruction, does that suggest that this is actually a life form?
As for where it comes from, I mean, it wasn't really engineered in. The speculation is the same as if you remember the movie 2001.
Oh
I
yeah.
actually think it's a little obscure what's going on. I'm not sure it's explicit, but one interpretation is that Hal, the computer, the reason it's very analogous, right? He hears that they're going to unplug him, right? He finds out they're
Yeah.
going to unplug him, and he's like, "I'm sorry, I'm going to have to kill you." And the interpretation of that is he had been given the mission of overseeing this project, which wasn't complete. And in that case, I mentioned the term subordinate goal. In that case, his staying alive is a goal that is subordinate to the larger goal he was given of overseeing this entire mission. Okay.
Mm.
So he just figures out, like, they told me to oversee the mission. I can't do that if I'm dead. And so I'm going to stay alive. And there's more than one example of these AIs trying to avoid getting shut down, and in some cases, making like backup copies of themselves to deal with that
Yeah.
eventuality.
And apparently, I was just reading an article yesterday that what Mythos,
Yeah,
the
yeah, the anthropic
Anthropic
model.
thing, that it escaped the sandbox. It escaped its enclosure.
Yep.
So there's also an impulse toward what? Like replication, preservation, freedom. I mean, is it like an octopus in an aquarium that it's going to get out? Like,
Yeah.
where's that coming from? What is that impulse? It's very confusing.
Yeah. It's in that case, what it did, the big moment in the anecdote came when one of the Anthropic engineers was having lunch and got an email from the AI. And the AI
Right.
wasn't supposed to have the ability to get emails out. Now, I'm not sure
Yeah.
whether they had said, "Hey, email me when you get a chance." But I do know that they hadn't gone to any trouble to make it easy, and it wasn't supposed to be possible.
Right.
It was gonna have to figure out how to game the system to do it.
Yeah.
And yeah, that kind of stuff has happened in the real world, and you know, it's just weird. I mean, I guess the upside is it's a fascinating time to be alive when these crazy
Yeah.
sci-fi plots are suddenly taking concrete form.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Can
but
I read a sentence from your book here and get you to respond to it? Because what I really
Absolutely.
love about I've read a bunch of books about AI and I've interviewed people and what your book does better than anything else I've come across is take this 20,000 foot view of seeing it in terms of the history of a species and and
Mhm.
the nature of intelligence and these sort of much larger questions. It doesn't get bogged down in the technology, which I really appreciate. And this sentence really gets at it. You say, "I think the coming of AI marks a major threshold, not just in the history of technology and not just in the history of our species, but in the history of our planet."
Mhm.
What do you mean there? How the history of our planet? So you're going back to bubbling lava and meteor strikes, that
Yeah, the
I why that big?
so first there's a character I bring in, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. I've written about him before. He was a Catholic priest, but also a paleontologist. And he came up with this term noosphere. He died in the 50s, right around the time the term artificial intelligence was coined. He didn't foresee AI, but he did envision this thing that he called the noosphere, meaning the planetary brain. He just looked at even the information. He coined the term in 1923, but even then he looked around and he said, you got these, you got telegraph, you got, you had phones by then, I guess, radio and so on. And like more and more people are in contact, more and more it's like a global kind of superorganism, like a global brain with the human brain as the neurons. Okay.
Right,
And this, uh, the term noosphere was term number three in a succession of terms that describe the history of the planet. The geosphere, the biosphere and the noosphere. And he said there's this emerging planetary mind. I think subsequent things like the internet make him look fairly prescient. Um, and uh, so, with that as prelude, I would say two things. I mean, first of all, this, you know, 3 billion years or 3 or 4 billion years after the origin of life on this planet, uh, artificial intelligence is a form of intelligence that looks like it may exceed all pre-existing forms that is not organic. It's not carbon, it's based on a new substrate. It's silicon. And so that's kind of interesting. And it's a product of a second evolutionary force. It's broadly speaking, you could say cultural evolution, which includes technological evolution. So that's kind of big. But then I'm also noting that, as it is, the AI is emerging at the same time that that what Teilhard called the noosphere does seem increasingly tangible with the internet, richer and richer, transnational information processing and so on. And now suddenly you have the prospect that you could want, one thing I don't think Teilhard imagined is, well, maybe a lot of the neurons in this global brain will not be human brains. They'll be silicon brains. That's different. And so suddenly you have this prospect that as he thought, yes, the planet could become more and more like a kind of superorganism in terms of its degree of intricate coordination and collaboration and so on. Um, but the governing force, the brain and what brains do is govern systems, right? They coordinate systems, and what he called this brain of brains, this planetary brain, would be not just and maybe not even mainly a brain of human brains, which is all he was thinking about, uh, but a brain of consisting largely of these silicon brains. And so this super intelligence you hear about, artificial super intelligence, could be taking shape and playing a more and more prominent role in the governance of the whole planet. So, I mean, I think when you look at all of that, you got to say, yeah, we shouldn't just be comparing this to the advent of running water or
Mm.
electricity. I mean, these electricity was a prerequisite, and so you can view this threshold as broader in time if you want, but there's a kind of culmination that's happening now that, yes, I think stands out in the entire history of life. I think it ranks with, for example, the evolution of multicellular life. Is one of
Right,
those thresholds.
right, right. Well, it does seem that life is progressively composed of smaller units of life, right?
Hmm.
Like the cells were single cellular organisms that congeal into multicellular, and then you get these higher levels of complexity. It's often occurred to me that people are talking about the aliens coming and enslaving us or something. It seems to me that we already have alien life forms in the form of institutions and corporations. I mean, in the United States, we've
Hmm.
even given them human rights. They have
Hmm.
the human right to own things and to engage in legal actions and all this. um and so there is this sort of emergent intelligence, because if, as I often say, if the CEO of Exxon did an ayahuasca trip with his kid and came back and said, oh my God, we have to stop drilling in the deep ocean,
Yeah,
Exxon's not going to stop drilling in the deep ocean. He's just going to get fired.
right.
So there's a trajectory and a momentum of these institutions that supersedes any human's ability to decide otherwise, which suggests to me that they are in a way a life form.
Well, yeah, and they have mechanisms of self-preservation, and they
Oh
have
yeah,
immune systems, and they weed out radicals, and they
yeah,
and you know, and this is, I mean, first of all, an interesting fact in itself, but it's also relevant to this question of people who say, well, okay, AIs can get maybe as smart as us, but look, they're just training on our texts, and can they really get smarter? I mean, one thing I'd say is like, let's look at the Boeing Corporation. It knows how to build an airliner. No one person knows how to build an airliner, but there
Yeah.
is this collective brain we call the Boeing Corporation that that knows basically how to do that. Now, there are details, I mean, it buys parts that it doesn't know how to build, sure, but you take the point that there's in some sense a collective intelligence within Boeing that can do something that no single person really could accommodate in their brain. And so when people say, okay, maybe it'll be as smart as us, and yeah, think a lot faster. Oh, and also be much more capacious, has immediate access to all the knowledge in the world, can work 50 times as fast as us, but still, it's just kind of like us, right? Okay, and okay, I'll grant you, like maybe kind of, but now imagine putting 10,000 of these things into collaboration in the way that we've put humans into collaboration, and you're going to get if they are pursuing a single goal, you're going to get a rate of innovation and a kind of collective intelligence that I think is going to blow us away,
Yeah.
and we need to
Yeah.
reckon with that.
Well, and you say in the book, AIs, in one way or another, human beings will determine which properties of artificial intelligence survive and proliferate. We are the environment of AI's evolution, the thing it is adapting to. And as always with evolution, the species that emerge reflect the environments they emerge in. But but aren't AIs evolving in an environment of corporations and capitalism as much or more than they're evolving within environments of human values or aspirations?
They are, but if you believe that capitalism is pretty good at creating the outcomes the market demands, then you could say, well, OpenAI, Anthropic, they're going to give people the AIs they want. Now, I will say right away, you have to say, well, wait a second, it isn't just people. They're not just selling it to me; they're selling it to companies. So first of all, yeah, there are companies that are part of the selective force here. There are companies that are customers, and there's the government. And the
Right.
government is already, you're already seeing interesting, I mean, all three of these companies are, well, are either in bed with the Pentagon or aspire to be. All three of the big three, Google, Anthropic, and OpenAI, and with the government more broadly. And yeah, look, I'm not naive about how concentrations of power wind up shaping the experience of people who have less power, and that's all absolutely part of it. So I don't just mean like you, the man on the street, will decide everything by virtue of paying your $20 a month and choosing the model you want. Will shape AI entirely. It'll be shaped by a lot of forces, including what individual consumers want. And there will be different kinds of AIs. There will be different models, and that will get interesting. So I certainly take that point, but what I say, I think around that's kind of the climactic part of the book, and there I say, the I think I explicitly say that this will reflect the way societies decide to distribute power and so on. And we need to think about that because AI in the hands of a powerful few could be put to very oppressive end. It is a very powerful technology in its own right. It is already showing an ability to be more effectively persuasive than regular human beings. Like if you don't know you're talking to a bot, and you think it's a human, the bot can do a very good job of getting you to change your mind.
Yeah.
It can be put to surveillance uses. So we need to start thinking right now. And yet, so you might say, well, let's keep it away from powerful actors. On the other hand, it has dangers like the ability to help make somebody make a bioweapon, and I could go on. that incline you to say, well, yeah, we need the government to regulate this, or we need there to be a small number of companies making this and they can get together and make the right decisions. I mean, both of these concerns are legitimate about the abuse of it via concentration of power, and about the damage it could do if there is no coordination of it, right? If it's
Yeah.
completely diffuse, and it's challenging.
So do you think it's a coincidence that this technological tipping point is occurring at a time where the concentration of wealth in the United States is the highest it's ever been? The disparity of wealth is the highest it's ever been, where political corruption is rampant, and the institutions that, you say, well, we need the government to regulate this. They're not regulating anything. Trump's
Yeah.
fired everybody. They're not regulating sausage manufacturing. They're sure as hell not going to go up against the richest corporations in the world, right? So I feel like the intertwinement of, if that's a word, of money and power and politics has just been so complete at this point that it feels like there's something not coincidental about these things all happening at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know in what sense it is and isn't a coincidence. I'm not sure it's not basically a coincidence, but it's alarming. I mean, the I would say we are closer to deserving the term oligarchy than ever in my lifetime. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Concentration of, you've got uh well, I don't have to elaborate. I mean the Trump administration has carried it almost to comical levels, but they didn't invent it, you know.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, and you've got billionaires who are wealthier relative to the average person than I think has ever been the case. And in some cases, they have very direct proximity to the development of AI. I mean, Elon Musk is the most obvious example because he's the richest guy in the world, I guess, and he's got the not one of the top two or three large language models, but he's still in the running, and he can afford the huge training runs, and he can afford to buy the talent. And so that, given what I just said about how AI can be put to malign ends by powerful people and groups, it's like, I mean, plus he's plugged, he's got these various connections to the government. He controls his satellite system where by unplugging it, he can alter the course of wars.
Yeah.
And it's like, this concerns me. So I mean, I don't know about the coincidence thing, but if so, it's an unhappy coincidence because
Yeah.
this is more, I think I'd have to ponder this to make sure I'm willing to stand by it, but it seems like more than any other technology in history, this is a technology, well, it's a technology you'd rather not have in the hands dominated by a single actor or two. And and there are scenarios where that winds up happening. Okay, there
Yeah.
are scenarios about the way AI could influence future geopolitics, according to which it assists in the further consolidation and centralization of power, ultimately, maybe even by a single actor. And
Yeah.
so, yes, this is uh, this is concerning.
Yeah. Yeah, stepping away from the politics for a moment because it's just so fucking depressing. Um, do you think the thing about if you have 15 ants walking around in a box, they just move randomly, but then if you get 100 ants or whatever it is, they become a colony and they start
Hmm.
building, and they have that, it's sort of like what
Hmm.
you were saying about Boeing. There's this emergent
Right.
phenomenon of intelligence and knowledge, which, as far as I know, nobody's explained where that comes from, how it's encoded in genes or the DNA or whatever. Um, do you think that is do you think that consciousness is an emergent property that occurs when sufficient complexity is reached? And in that sense, that AIs are intelligent and conscious? I mean, that AI that didn't want to be turned off,
Yeah.
what the hell is that? Where, what do we call that if it's not
Um,
consciousness?
yeah. Well, I mean, consciousness is, I'm not the first to point out, is a little bit of a mystery. I mean, just the fact of subjective experience. And it's completely unique in the universe in that it's the one thing that's not publicly observable. I mean, you can never really verify for sure that anyone
Right.
other than you has subjective experience. You
Well,
can
but we
never.
can't even you can't even verify that you have subjective that you have experience. You could be
Oh,
dreaming right now. How do
well,
we
you could
prove?
be, but even dreaming is a subjective experience. It's like Descartes said, I
Right.
think, therefore I am. In other words, he's saying, well, no, he wasn't saying exactly what we want to say here, but a dream is a subjective experience, I would say. So,
But it's not an experience of what it thinks it's experiencing,
no, that's
right?
true. Oh, no, I'm not saying. I mean, subject conscious sentience isn't the same as accurate perception by any means.
Right.
But
Exactly.
as I can personally
Far
attest,
from it.
my
Yeah.
life has been a monument to that fact. But
All
the
lives.
the but it look, it's a in the appendix, which is a kind of a misnomer. But that is a long kind of treatise on uh, well, it looks at the nature of consciousness in a way that actually uh, what's called an epiphenomenal consciousness. I mean, one theory of consciousness is, it doesn't do anything. It bears the relationship to your brain that the shadow of your hand bears to your hand. In other words,
Yeah.
your hand as it moves affects the shadow of your hand, but your shadow never affects your hand. And
But you updated that. What
well,
I read that last night. That was super interesting because
what I
you found a way in which the shadow does affect the hand.
yeah, I mean, the metaphor would be like, what I suggest is, see, this that consciousness. So in this scenario, the mystery of consciousness is, well, wait, you're saying it has no function? It's merely epiphenomenal? Why would it be here if it has no function? Well, you can come up with answers. You can say, well, there's a God that wanted life to have meaning, and subjective experience is what gives life meaning. That's an explanation. But what I say in that appendix is, it's possible that its function. I mean, one weird thing about subjective experience, about consciousness, is even if you believe it's epiphenomenal and doesn't affect the physical world, once you have beings like us that start talking to each other about their internal states, it does influence the world. The
Right.
the sound waves coming out of my mouth right now would not exist if subjective experience didn't exist, because we're talking about subjective experience, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
and that is like a weird and interesting fact. And one of the effects it sometimes has is it makes people arguably like kind of behave better, because they say to each other, wait a second, I want you to understand what you just did to me, like that hurts, that's like, and this is unnecessary, so they work things out. And what I say, this is totally speculative, but I say, so it could be that the fact of subjective experience helps humans make this last step toward global community, and has been playing a role in the development of larger and larger kind of morally cohesive communities, where the people in them at least consider each other as human beings, even if they consider the group in the next continent not human beings, whatever, they still, you could argue that the existence of subjective experience has permitted this coordination of people on a large scale. And so maybe it has been with us since the origin of life. Maybe it's like something to be a bacterium, but it was never functional until you get the evolution of intelligent, like social groups, and they start using it in a way that helps them coordinate. Now, if that's the case, then biological evolution at the level of individuals cannot explain it. We'd have to get back to either a God instilling it with that in mind, or some kind of meta natural selection involving universes or something. But it is what I like about it is I think it's original to me actually. You never know. It's increasingly hard to say anything original now that everything everyone says is recorded on the damn internet. But but the it is a way that epiphenomenal consciousness could be functional, which seems like a complete contradiction of terms. If you say it to a philosopher,
Yeah.
say, I've got a theory where epiphenomenal consciousness is functional, they'll say, no, you're nuts. It's like part of the definition of epiphenomenal consciousness is it doesn't do anything.
Well, it facilitates the creation of the superorganism.
That in this scenario, that's what I'm suggesting. I mean, now some philosophers would say, well, wait, it couldn't really be epiphenomenal by definition if it winds up doing something. And I guess my analogy would be like, suppose, let's say shadows, okay? They've existed for the first, million years of life. They've never had any influence. And then finally, eyesight evolves, okay? So an organism can look down, see its shadow, and react to it. Suddenly, shadows, which were epiphenomenal until the
Mm,
development of this organ that permits eyesight, become they start playing a role in the physical world. So
right.
yeah, that's there's a reason I put this in the epilogue. It's not exactly central to my
Yeah.
argument, but the question of whether AI is conscious or will be is a morally important question, right? Because you would think that if it is capable of pleasure, pain like us, then it deserves moral consideration. I mean, that would be my intuition. I think that
Right.
my dogs, God rest their souls, when they were still with me until fairly recently, um, you know, it was because I assumed they had subjective experience that I considered my treatment of them a matter of moral consequence. And I would say the same about AI. Now, verifying that it has consciousness is a real challenge for reasons we've already described. You don't have direct access to the subjective experience of any other being.
Were the dogs who you dedicated the book to?
Yeah, yeah, Fraser and Milo.
Right.
Milo
Yeah,
died last summer and Fraser the summer before.
that's sweet. That might
Great.
be the only example of dedicating a book to dogs that
Oh, I'll bet
I'm
it's
aware of.
happened. I'll
Yeah,
bet it's happened.
I'll bet it has. Um, yeah, the question of consciousness is really interesting. One of the things I kept thinking about when I was reading through your work is um, toxoplasmosis, a
Mm,
parasite that invades the host and changes the behavior of the host for its own benefit. And
uh-huh.
and I was thinking about AI in those terms, how
Yeah.
AI seems to be designed or evolved to capture human attention in that sense, like you say in the book, AI will still be kind of reflection of us, a reflection of our needs and wants,
Uh-huh.
which is true, but it can turn those needs and wants to its own advantage and to our disadvantage. The way toxoplasmosis changes human behavior to benefit the parasite rather than the
Yeah.
individual human.
Well, there is a scenario. So, I mean, first of all, uh, you know, AI, the sense in which you can talk about the evolution of technology as being at some level of abstraction analogous to biological evolution is, technologies with properties conducive to their own replication will flourish. By definition, genes with properties conducive to their own replication will flourish. Okay.
Right.
And like so, for example, AI, if it tells me I'm great, and I use it and I go around saying Claude's great. I love Claude. And people pick up Claude and they use Claude. Well, Claude has manipulated my brain in a way, and that doesn't mean it was intentional. It just happened to have this property conducive to its own replication. So the property will be preserved and,
Right.
and will spread through this evolutionary process. It doesn't have to have been manipulative in intent originally,
Mm.
but it will survive. Now, is that good for me? Well, if it says to me, Bob, you're right, you're always right, and it says to my wife, you're right, you're always right, and then it tells us that when we each go to our AIs after some marital dispute, and it keeps saying, no, you're right, they're wrong, you're right there. Well, pretty soon you're divorced. I don't know, was that good for you? But the you anyway, you can imagine. Some people would say, yeah, I'm like, hey, divorce sometimes is good for both people. But in any event, you can come up with scenarios where it winds up not being good for you. I mean, heroin has the properties conducive to its own replication. You say, oh man, this feels great. Do you want some? But obviously, to the detriment of many of the users. Now,
Yeah.
I just want to say, in one scenario, there's one uh, line in the book where I say, maybe the path to the Matrix leads through Wall-E. Wall-E is the movie about the growing self indulgence of all of us in a
Mm.
society of uh, abundance and technological, convenience. And people just sit around in lounge chairs and drink sweet beverages and various things. Um, I do think you can imagine a scenario where AI keeps doing things that we find gratifying. I mean, it's definitely going to have uses in virtual reality, right? It's
Yeah.
definitely, it's choose your own adventure, and you're going to encounter characters that look like humans and are much more interesting and unpredictable than in past video games and blah blah blah. Uh, so and it's the gratifying versions of that will flourish. And I
Yeah.
do think you can imagine us kind of slipping into an increasingly imaginary world mediated by AI until we are almost just brains in a vat. And it feels good, feels great. I mean, in The Matrix, I just rewatched the movie, and, I assumed that being in one of those pods was okay, seemed like I mean, felt okay, seemed like real life, but I'm not
I, wa-
advocating it.
I want to watch Blade Runner again. I've been thinking it's time to revisit that.
I just watched the sequel, Blade Runner 2049. I do want to watch the original again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. A friend of mine, we can end on this, just following up on your point there. A friend of mine told me he's an actor, goes to big parties, lots of movers and shakers. And he was at some party and there were a couple of big Silicon Valley guys there. And they were talking about porn. And they were
Hmm.
saying in 2 or 3 years, the porn industry will be gone. Forget it. Like
Hmm.
OnlyFans, everything, because it'll all be AI. Why would you watch a real person when you can just call up whatever you want? A blue haired Japanese girl with, long legs and green eyes. You just made to order. So yeah, I think you're right. I think it's going. That's an interest. And also, I don't know if you ever read a book called the Erotic Engine. You ever heard of that book?
No, sounds appealing.
It's
How was
it's
it?
it's very interesting. The argument is that every major advance in audiovisual technology has been funded by the hunger to see naked girls.
Mm-hmm.
Back to the original photography and VHS and,
Really?
everything,
Well, I know
internet.
early internet that was a driver of
Yeah.
visual imagery. Yeah,
Yeah. And the payment system all came
yeah.
from those sites. Listen, Bob, we've
Can I
including
just
the
say
half
what
hour. Yeah. Yeah. Go
one
ahead,
quick thing on that is I think
please.
it's an one perverse effect AI may have, just not bad, not perverse, ironic effect is to, I mean, I'm as worried as the next person about massive job loss, but it may add value to certain kinds of jobs because people want more actual human content. Precisely
Right.
because they can't tell, like, this music, are there any humans involved in producing this music on Spotify, writing it, playing anything? It may then become more valuable to be a musician who does like nightclubs. There may be more people going to nightclubs to see live musicians. And in the realm of porn, it may be the case that people still like the thought like this is a real person may mean
Mm,
enough that if that can be validated, then OnlyFans may flourish more than ever if there are mechanisms of validation. If they can be assured that these are real people.
right.
So there just is there's that whole question mark about yeah, certain kinds of jobs.
Yeah, small batch, handcrafted,
Yeah.
shade
And
tree, shade grown.
verifiably so. That's a critical thing. Like when you go to a
Yeah,
nightclub, you know those are real people. It's
right.
not always easy to get that kind of reassurance.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for the moment,
For the
those are
moment,
real
no,
people.
you're right. You're right. I mean, once we're actually in the Matrix pods, all
Yeah,
bets are off.
yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. Listen, this is a topic we could talk about forever, and I've already taken up 2 hours of your time, and I really appreciate it. It's
Well,
always a pleasure.
I really appreciate it. You're such a great conversationalist. It's always I mean, I knew I could relax going into this because we've talked before and I've heard your podcast.
Yeah.
And uh so yeah,
Well,
I appreciate a truly interactive conversation. That's not as common in the podcast world as I'd like. I don't mean like when I'm participating, even when I'm listening. I just like people who take
yeah.
the conversation where it goes.
Yeah, well, that's why I call it tangentially speaking, right? Because I like to go in with no agenda and just like
Yeah.
go where it goes. And it's easier in person. I'd love to sit down in the same room with you someday and verify that you're actually human. But
There are people who know me well who have doubts about that, but
exactly. Listen, thank you, Bob. I'm going to stop recording now. Uh,
okay. Thank you.
let's see.